You're welcome to today's class. So today we're still going to take a question on standard costing to buttress our point. Furthermore, on variance analysis. So there is actually practice question 7, and it is treat box thus Coolbox Limited produces souvenirs for international airlines operators. The company uses a standard absorption costing system. The standard cost card for one of Coolbox Limited souvenir is as follows. Materials is 1.5 kg. So the standard material is 1.5 kg and 6 naira to produce one finished goods. So how many units, what's the price per kg of material? We'll get that later. Labor 8 naira per unit. Overhead column variable 1.6 hours. That means labor is 1.6 hours to produce 1 unit. Fixed overhead 1.6 hours. Then total cost is 30 and selling price is 40. So the profit per unit, budgeted profit per unit is 10. Now budgeted units is 5,000 units for production and 5,000 units for sales. Actual is 6,000 units for production and 4,300 units. They gave us a sales revenue, which are this and this, as the case may be. So we'll continue. The resources used and actual cost for April were as follows. So this is the actual cost. So I'm going to highlight this for you to be able to know which one is actual cost and which one is not actual cost. This will help you in the interpretation of the question. So we'll continue. So we have our actual cost. So we have our actual cost. So we now continue. Materials. The total material we use is 10,300 kgs and the price we bought them were 38,720. You can get price per kg. The total hour use is 11,420 and the cost was 71,200. For variable, the total cost is 29,650. For fixed, 83,800. So we continue. The 11,420 hours, which is this, I hope you're looking at this, include 2,270 hours of idle time. This was caused by an unexpected machine breakdown. All materials purchased were used during the month required. Prepare 1. A reconciliatory statement for budgeted and actual profit for Coolbox Limited. To explain blah 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 blah. Now my concern is actually in the area of reconciliatory statements. That is where I'm going to focus on. So start with workings. The first workings we are going to look at is direct material price variance. Direct material price variance. The formula is standard price minus actual price times actual quantity purchase. Where standard price, what is standard price? Is 4 naira. How did we get 4 naira? It is 6. Look at it, divide by 1.5. Because to produce each unit, we will use 1.5 kg. And the total cost of each unit in terms of material is 6 naira. So what is now the cost per unit per kg? It is 6 divided by 1.5. Now, actual price will now be the total cost we incur for material is 38,720 and the total unit bought is 10,300. So the cost per unit is 3.76 kobo. The actual quantity purchased is 10,300. Substitute in the formula you now have this, and our value, our answer is 2,480 naira, and it's favorable. Why is it favorable? It is favorable because the difference in the bracket is positive, as I always tell you. Then we'll now look at direct material usage variance. The formula is standard quantity minus actual quantity times standard price. So where standard quantity is to produce 1 unit of finished goods, we'll use 1.5 kg of raw material. Of raw material. So to use this 1.5 kg of raw material, then how many units were produced? 6,000 units were produced. So multiply, we now have 9,000 kgs. Are you there? Then the actual quantity, you already know, is 10,300 kgs. Now remember, I highlighted the actual section with this sky blue color. So the actual quantity is 10,300 kg, while the actual cost is 38,720. So that is how we got those values. So we'll come back to what we were doing before. So you substitute, you now have 900 minus 10,300 times 4 will give you 5,200, and it is adverse. Why is it adverse? It's adverse because the difference in the bracket is negative. Remember, these things are at your disposal, so you can look at them and get hold of what you want. We now have direct labor rate variance. Now we're going to look at labor rate variance. The formula is standard rate minus actual rate times actual hour paid for. Now, where standard rate is 8 divided by 1.6, which will give you 5. So the standard rate is 5 naira per hour. While the actual rate is 71,200 divided by 11,420, and that will give you 6.23. Now, actual hour purchase is 11,420 hours. So when you substitute, you have this. You have 5 minus this times 11,420 will now give you 14,100 naira, and is adverse. Since it is adverse, we move down to labor efficiency. In labor efficiency, the formula is standard hour times actual hour into standard rate. Now, what is our standard hour? Our standard hour is 1.6 hours, and our actual quantity produced, actual finished goods produced is 6,000, which will give us 96. We'll come to actual hours. How do we get this actual hours of 9,150? You will take away idle time from the total hours paid for, because efficiency deals with the actual hour worked, not actual hour paid for. So the number of hours that the worker spent doing nothing, that is idle, is removed. So that is why we deducted this. So you now come down and substitute. You have 9,600 minus this times 5 will give you 2,250, and is favorable. So since there is idle time, it is important that you compute idle time by multiplying the idle time by the standard rate, which is 2,270 times 5 will give you 11,350 adverse, because idle time is usually adverse. So now move down to variable production expenditure variance. This makes use of the same formula with labor rate variance, which is standard rate minus actual rate times actual hour worked. I know that our actual hour worked is 9,150. So what is our standard rate? Our standard rate is 2.5. How was it gotten? By saying 4 divided by 1.6. Then actual rate is 3.24. So which was gotten by dividing this correctly. You can see that in the question when you look at it. So we now have actual hour worked, which is 9,150. Substituting the formula, you have 6,775, and they are adverse. Why is it adverse? Because the one in the bracket is negative, as I always say. So move down to variable production overhead efficiency variance. So this variable production overhead efficiency variance, the formula is standard R minus actual R times standard rate, where standard R is 9,600 hours. Standard hours is 9,600 hours. Why standard? And how was it gotten? It was 1.6 times 6,000. This 6,000 is actual unit produced, which is in the question. Then actual R is usually 9,150. So substitute, you have 1,125, which is actually positive. And since it is positive, it is favorable. So that is that for variable. So now move to fixed. Now fixed variance computation is usually technical. I always advise my students to pay meticulous attention to fixed variance computation. This will help you to master what it takes to do it, so that subsequently you wouldn't have an issue during exam or during personal practice. Now, the first thing we are going to calculate is expenditure variance for fixed production overhead. The formula is budgeted fixed production overhead minus actual fixed production overhead. Now, how do you get your budgeted fixed production overhead? You now use your actual cost per finished goods times budgeted finished goods. So we'll go back to the question. To the standard. This is a standard. Fixed cost is 12 naira per unit. And how many units did we budget? We budgeted to produce 5,000 units. So fixed cost will now be 5,000 times 12 will give you budgeted fixed production overhead. Now, actual fixed production overhead is 83,800 naira. So we'll go back to where we were. So you substitute. You already know how 60,000 was gotten. You also know how 83,000 was gotten. You substitute. You have 23,800 naira, which is adverse. Are you there? 23,800 naira, which is adverse. Good. So with this, we are good to go. So we'll now look at fixed production overhead volume variance. It also have a formula. Now, in order to master these computations, it is important you start acquainting yourself with the formulas. And these acquaintances of formula comes with consistency practice with the numerous questions that are available to you. So you must ensure that you keep on practicing 24/7 to master these formulas and their applications and interpretations appropriately. So we continue. So the formula is budgeted R minus standard R times standard rate. So now budgeted R will now be number of hours time. You understand? And how do we get number of hours? It is now standard hour per unit, which is 1.6 hours. Standard hours per unit, which is 1.6 hours, times the budgeted units. That will give us 8,000 hours. Now the standard hour is what? That same standard hour per unit, which is 1.6, you understand, times the actual units produced, which is 6,000. That will give you 9,600. Now, what is your standard rate per unit? Is 7.5. How do you get 7.5? It is 12 divided by 1.6. Now, you substitute in the formula. You have 12,000 naira and it's favorable. Why is it favorable? It is favorable because standard hours increased. And why did it increase? It increased because actual units is higher than budgeted units. And whenever your actual unit is higher than budgeted unit, it is usually favorable because we are to gain more when we produce more and sell more. Are you there? So as long as we produce more and sell more, then we are making a good profit. So that is that for fixed production overhead. Then we'll now move to sales variance, which is the easiest to compute. So we now look at price variance. So price variance will be standard price minus budgeted price minus actual price times actual quantity sold. So now substitute, the budgeted price is 40, while the actual price is 38.3, which actually I show how it was gotten. Both I also show how both were gotten. So you now substitute, you have 7 to adverse. So you now move to volume variance, which is actual quantity purchased minus budgeted quantity purchase. That is supposed to be minus, not plus. Sorry for that typo error. So times standard profit. Now, where budgeted quantity is 5,000, actual quantity is 4,3, and standard profit is 10. And how do they get it? 40 minus 30. Remember, at the commencement of the class, I did tell you that budgeted profit per unit is 10, which is 40 naira sales price minus 30 naira cost price. That will give you 7,000 naira, and it's adverse because the unit sold is less than the unit purchase, and it's less than the unit budgeted, so it's adverse. You underperformed. So we now look at computation of budgeted profit, which is 50,000. Standard profit per unit times budgeted profit will now give you budgeted gross profit. So we now look at actual sales and gross profit. Actual gross profit, you just pick the values in the actual table. So you have sales, you less all this cost. So you have sales. So you now bring all these costs together to now give you this value 223,370. You understand? Now remember, there is closing stock. There is closing stock. I didn't include closing stock. There is closing stock. You manufactured how many? You manufactured 6,000 units and you sold 4,3. You have a closing stock of you have a closing stock of 17. So we have to bring that in. It is important that we recognize that. So we come back here and clean this. So you bring in your closing stock. Now I always tell my students that closing stock is valued at standard price. So closing stock is 1,700 and standard price times standard price, and standard price is 30. So so 17 times 3, that will give you 51,000 naira, I presume. That will give you 51,000 naira. So we have 51,000. That is the value of our closing stock. That's the value of our closing stock. That's the value of our closing stock. So you take away the value of closing stock. You take away the value of closing stock from the total cost. Take away the value from total cost. Then whatsoever you have becomes cost of goods sold. So whatsoever you have becomes cost of goods sold. So think whatever you have becomes cost of goods sold. So we now have So we now have 223,370 minus 51,000. That will give us 172,370. So you now take this away from your sales. Remember, this is cost of sales. So you take away cost of sales from sales. You understand? Take away cost of sales from sales. So you now have 164,800 minus answer will give you minus 7,570. Then I have 7,570, and it will be in negative form because it is loss. So this becomes our actual loss. So that is that about this, and I hope it makes sense to you. You should know how this was gotten. This was gotten by adding all the actual cost incurred. Now, we incurred this actual cost to produce how many units? To produce 6,000 units, and we sold 4,300. So this 1,700 was gotten by saying 6,000 produced minus 4,300 sold. That was how we got that 1,700. So we'll now start reconciliation. Now reconciliation is easy. What do? You bring in your budgeted profits, which is this. You bring it in. So when you bring in your budgeted profits, let me highlight it for easy identification. So when you bring in your budgeted gross profit, you less your sales price variance because it's adverse. You also less your sales volume variance because it's adverse. When you less this both, you now have this. Now this is now where you adjust the remaining cost. So you bring in your direct material price variance. You go and check. If it is favorable, it will be under favorable column. If it is adverse, it will be under adverse column. So you bring in your direct material usage variance. It is under adverse column. You bring in your direct rates variance. It is under adverse. You bring in your efficiency variance. It is under favorable. You bring in your idle time variance. It is under adverse. You now bring your variable production overhead expenditure variance. It is under adverse. You also bring in your variable production overhead efficiency variance. It is under favorable. You bring in your fixed production, which is adverse. You bring in your fixed production volume, which is what? Favorable. Now, when you add these two sides, it will definitely give you a value. To give you a value. So we can try to add by saying 2,480 plus 2,250 plus 1,025 plus 12,000. That'll give you 17,855. 17,855. So you can also add this column, which is 5,000 plus 14,100 plus 11,350 plus 6,775 plus 23,800 that'll give you 6125. So we have 61,025. Now this adverse is minus. Why 17,855 is positive? So you just minus 17,855. We have 43,170. So we have 43,170, and it will be in minus because the adverse is higher. So since the adverse is higher, it will be in minus. So since it is in minus, you now say 50,000 minus answer. So 50,000 minus answer, that will give us 6,830. We have 6,830. You can see that this is not the same with the actual loss we calculated. So there might have been challenge because it didn't balance, but that does not mean. The essence of the class is to teach you the procedures, although I will rectify it, then make the necessary correction, but is to teach you the necessary procedures you have to follow to tackle these questions. So I'll be dropping assignments for you to follow and attempt yourself. Do have a nice night.